So in this video we're going to be looking at the world of work now and what's changed. I feel privileged to have been in the world of work, knowledge work, particularly in the IT and project management industry for just over 4 decades. And although I've been heavily invested in identifying principles at work in methods like Prince2, managing successful programs, and more recently stakeholder engagement, I've really come to accept that something has shifted in the way we work in now. Something in the environment, something in the context that we work in is very different to the world I started work in 1976. So it's not just happening faster, it's happening differently. And to help us begin to see a pattern here, I've mapped out some major events of world history in the last 3 decades, but also major technology events and military events, just so that we begin to get a flavour of the pattern that's emerging for us here. Let's look back in 1988. The first ISPs come into formation. I didn't know, even though I was an IT professional, I didn't even know what an internet service provider was in 1988, and in truth, not until some years later. Then a year later, the Berlin Wall comes down, and as we all know in hindsight, that had a major impact, not just on the structure of Europe, but also in terms of the function of military alliances like NATO. Suddenly there were tanks in parade grounds in West Germany, formerly West Germany, that had been deployed to be ready for an attack from a now non-existent enemy, the Soviet Union. Then in 1990, the Western military did go to war against Saddam Hussein in the first Gulf War. This is a satellite photo of the end of the war, just after Saddam Hussein's retreating troops had set alight the oil wells. You can see the smoke plume streaming from north to south. Then in 1998, the US Military College on the East Coast develops a way of making sense of this new reality, this new military reality, with the concept of Vuca that we'll explore in a moment. 2 years later, in the IT world, in the software development world, some luminaries of lean software development gathered together in the Snowbird ski resort in Colorado and agree what we now know as the Agile Manifesto. This was the start of a different way of developing software, the Agile way. Then a year later, we have that defining moment in history on the 9th of September when there was the attack on the World Trade Center in New York. Those of us at the time knew that nothing would be the same again, and indeed we've been proved right. 2003 is the end of the Second Gulf War, with the toppling not just of this statue but of Saddam Hussein's regime. 2004, 4th of February, as recently as this, Facebook was formed. Such a part of our lives. 2 years later, Twitter was formed. A year later, Steve Jobs announces the launch of the first iPhone. Only 10 years ago, it seems much longer than that we've had iPhones and smartphones like it around. But no, it's that recent. And then a year later, we have the economic collapse. Lehman Brothers and other investment houses go bust. We have nations on the brink of bankruptcy like Iceland and Ireland. 2011 is an illustrative year in this new reality. So many major world events seem to cascade one on each other. And then in 2016, last year, we have 2 cases where opinion polls fail. The forecasts are wrong. The forecasts are wrong about the referendum vote in the UK, which votes to leave the European Union. and we're still working out the consequences of that now. And then the opinions polls fail again, predicting that Hillary Clinton will be the next president of the United States of America. Instead, it's Donald Trump. So that is just a slice of things that have happened in the last 3 decades to illustrate that things are not just happening faster, they're happening very, very differently. Whether you are looking at it from the frame of reference of military or business or technology. I heard Colin Powell speak in, I think it was 2006 in Chicago at a conference called the Leadership Summit. And he spoke about this thing called Vuca, that the American Military College had been working with for some time. And as he explained Vuca, all of the business people there began to recognize that kind of sense-making description of the world of business that they lived in as well. So let me describe what Vuca is. Vuca is actually an acronym that sums up 4 key features of this new world. It's volatile. The V is volatile. The U is uncertain. The C is complex. And the A is ambiguous. Volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And these aren't independent facets. They're somewhat interrelated with each other. Let's have a look at volatility. This is about a massive rate of change, which I think I've just illustrated in that partial timeline. I think we're doing fine quickly changes into we're not coping. This is the world of volatility that I think we can all recognize. And then there's the uncertain aspect about this world. We don't know everything and we don't know the consequences. We may have Wikipedia. We may know that the information is out there somewhere, but we're still very uncertain about it. The analogy is of driving along a well-known road, only now it's in thick fog. We become aware that we can't see so far ahead. There may be obstructions in the road. We may know all of the curves and turns, but we don't know what lies ahead. And so our immediate response is to slow down. Then there's the aspect of the complex. Look at this child here. The complex is a web of cause and effect. We don't live in a linear world anymore. Perhaps we never did. The child pulls on one part of the mobile and the rest jiggles. The child has problems understanding it. We're like that child. When we act on one part of the system, we get unintended consequences. And then finally, there's ambiguity, failure to understand the significance of evidence. This is about risk assessment. So here's a little fawn and here's a great white shark. Which is more dangerous, Bambi or Jaws? Well, it turns out from fatality statistics in America that 200 times more Americans are killed from deer strikes than they are by being eaten by a shark. So that's the kind of framework of Vuca, and I think we can all recognize it in the world of business. But I'm recognizing it as well in terms of the world of our personal work, the world of our self-leadership, the world of our personal mastery. Let's look at each in turn and look at some of the traditional approaches that we take, approaches that may have worked well in 1996 but work very poorly now. So in dealing with volatility, the classic response is to go faster, try harder, cut more costs. One client described this to me like playing a game of Tetris where they were just losing. Let's look at uncertainty. The negative way is to fear, to be inflexible and to continue to drive the way we always have done down this road, but also maybe just to have blind faith in process and methods. Then there's dealing with complexity. What I find a lot of people doing, traditionally is to deny that there is even complexity, that the world actually fits our models. And those models are pretty simplistic and linear, and then we're surprised when we get the unintended consequences. And then how do we deal with ambiguity? Well, the dangerous response is always to trust our instinct and to take pride in our successes in the past. What we're discovering now is that there are some very poor personal responses we can all take to volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. In the next video, we'll look at some better responses to these dimensions of Vuca. Thank you for watching.